everybody, this is the Wild Ass Podcast, and I am your host, Wild Ass Craig. This is episode 37, and in this episode, I get to introduce all of you to Mackenzie Tricker. I got to meet up with and spend a couple days with Mackenzie, her husband, and some mutual friends in October when I was on the road in South Carolina, and she agreed to come on and share her story. If you follow off-road motorcycle racing, you may have heard of her. Mackenzie grew up in Australia and started riding on a mini quad, but unlike most kids, she did not keep it on four wheels. Her dad brought home a PW50. She begged him to take her to the track, and it went from there. In 2011, she moved here to the States, where she would go on to win multiple titles. She won Loretta Lynn's amateur motocross titles in 3 of her 4 tries, and most recently, she is the reigning 5-time AMA National Enduro Elite Women's Champion. Let's get into her story, and if nothing else, just get her talking so we can listen to the accent. Mackenzie, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
It's great having you on. I'm super excited to have this one.
Yeah, should be good.
It'll be good. We met through Lacey, a mutual friend. She's a longtime friend of ours. She was Renee's neighbor when she was very little, and she grew up, of course, and then I became friends with her family and her dad, and we're still all really good friends. And I just kind of wanted to find out, how did you two meet?
So I was at Club MX in 2014 and 15, I think, and just prior to that, she was actually there. I think she moved from Minnesota down to kind of try and chase her motocross career. So I didn't actually cross paths with her, but I had known about her, heard about who she was. And then obviously I was always based in Travelers Rest. And then we kind of just had some mutual friends, and I've seen her at some local tracks here in Travelers Rest. And obviously there not being many women that ride, let alone race around the whole world, and then let alone in a small town of Travelers Rest, we kind of just, like I said, crossed paths and kind of became friends, and the rest is history. Now we try and catch up pretty regularly. She's a good cook. As you know, that's where we just hung out recently, went over and Lacey cooked us all dinner.
Everybody loves it when Lacey cooks dinner, don't they?
Yep, absolutely.
So that night you came over, you and your husband, Dylan, and one of the better parts of the night was all of us just sitting around on the deck visiting.
Yep.
And it was there that I got into your story a little bit, and I'm like, hey, would you come on? And you said, sure, that'd be great. So here we are.
Yep. To
get into your story, where I'm at in the experience I've had, when children start riding on mini quads, they don't typically go to 2 wheels. I don't know if it's a fear of motorcycles falling over or what it is, but what prompted your dad to bring home a PW50? Do you remember?
Not really. I'm not 100% sure. I need to find out. I don't know if my dad raced growing up, but I know that he always rode motorcycles. And I believe when I had that 50 quad, I think it was a little Suzuki 50, I believe at the time he may have had a dirt bike. So maybe that's what led him to getting me a PW50. Not really sure, but to be honest, I'm glad that he got me 2 wheels, not 4.
It's worked out, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
How did you talk him into bringing you to the racetrack?
So kind of long story short, my parents growing up own a boat dealership, and it was about 30 minutes. The dealership at the time was about 30 minutes from my house, and we had to pass a little motocross track, a motocross club. Actually, it was called Mini Cana. It was Blockham Hills Mini Cana Club, and yeah, just obviously passing that pretty regularly. I just begged my dad, hey, can you take you? And finally, he gave in and took me there on that little Pee-wee 50 or PW50. We call it Pee-wee 50, PW50, and I think we did that a couple of times, and then just kind of progressed from there. He got me a Husqvarna 50, and just progressed today. Just got me a bunch of different bikes.
I apologize, I can't remember this, but do you have any brothers or sisters?
Yeah, I do. I actually have a brother and a sister, and then I also have 2 stepbrothers now. My parents split up in 2010, and my mom and Rob, they didn't get remarried, but they've been together 12, 13 years or something. And yes, I have 2 stepbrothers as well.
So did your brother and sister, did they ride motorcycle too?
My brother used to ride that little 50 quad, and then I believe when my dad got me maybe that Pee-wee 50, he got my brother a KX60, and I don't think my brother ever pushed a race or anything, but he knew how to ride. But after I started racing and riding, my brother and sister both also started racing, and my sister did it for a little bit, but she's more of a girly girl. But my brother followed through with it for a while until he was maybe in his later teen years. he got injured a few times, and he's pretty smart. So he went to university and things like that. And yeah, the risk for a reward wasn't worth it to him, and he hung up his boots. But yeah, there for a while, my whole family rode. We would go away on weekends that we had off from racing and go stay out a couple hours out in the bush, or I guess woods, you would say in America, but out bush in a place called Lily, and we'd go trail riding as a family. So that was really good growing up because, yeah, my sister and my mom also rode with my dad and my brother and myself.
That's awesome. I didn't know that. Cool.
Yeah.
How old were you when you went to the race the first time?
That I don't really know. I want to say maybe like 6 or 5 or 6, around maybe even 7. I don't know. It's pretty young. Maybe 7.
So this all started with
2001.
This all started with you racing, not your brother.
Yep. No, so it was all me. Look, we had bikes because my dad rode a little bit when he was growing up, and my family is a racing family. My dad actually, so did my mom growing up. They both raced boats. My dad still races boats. So yeah, we just, had motorcycles, and yeah, just begged my dad to take me racing. And then, yeah, kind of my brother and sister just followed as I did it.
You mentioned earlier, to get back to your story, girls riding, racing, there's not a lot of them, less of them to live in a very small town like where you live. How's the girls racing scene in Australia?
Yeah, like obviously Australia is pretty big. It's the country is not that much smaller than America itself. Just our population is a lot smaller. Like I think the population of Australia is like 25 million. And I think the state of California may be around that or even more. So you've got a lot more states here in America that add up for a lot more people. So obviously just bigger economy, bigger industry, a lot more people that have bikes over here, a lot more people ride just because there's a lot more people. So obviously everything's a little bit smaller in Australia. The racing itself is really good. It's a great stepping stone for the girls, that are riding and racing. But as far as support, I'm sure there's girls there that get bikes and parts and maybe gear, but probably don't make any money. Growing up, I had a really good support from Yamaha actually, and I got bikes, parts, gear, all that. But I had to get myself to the races. I didn't make any money, so that's why it was either go to the US or go to Europe to kind of make a living out of racing. Interesting,
and of course, language barriers. The United States seems like an easier travel. Talk about your decision to come here.
Yeah. So obviously when I was kind of looking at coming over here, I was 13, 14. I guess I was on a 250F. The WMX here in the US at the time was really strong. So obviously we followed that, but we also followed the WMX over in Europe. At the time that we were watching, there was actually a girl from New Zealand that was winning a lot. I think her name was Catherine Trum. So we followed that pretty heavily just because obviously New Zealand's just, not that far away from Australia. But yeah, going to Europe would have been a huge language barrier. That was something that, stopped me from even kind of pursuing that. And obviously my parents owning their own business, they were lucky enough to be able to travel back and forth and still are more than somebody that works a 9 to 5. And for somebody else, you only get a couple of weeks of holidays for the year, but they couldn't obviously pack their bags and go with me for a whole year. And obviously being pretty young when I did coming to the States was a little bit easier than going to Europe. So yeah, I'm kind of glad that I did come to the US. I would have loved to have maybe tried a WMX over in Europe at the time that I was racing motocross more heavily, but that didn't happen. But yeah, I'm happy I came to the US.
I mean, it led you right here to the Wild Ass Podcast.
Yeah, it did. Yeah. So glad.
So yeah. I don't think we touched on this. I want to hear all about the first racetrack you went to.
In Australia or here?
Yes, in Australia.
Well, it would have been that mini bike club that I started at, Broken Hills Mini Bike Club. As far as like maybe a sole motocross track, I would say it would have probably been Oakdale, JMCC, or Lower Mountains Motorcycle Club, which they're both an hour from where I grew up. They're not like famous known tracks, but there was a lot of good riders that used to ride and race and come out of those areas. I mean, because it's only an hour or two from the heart of Sydney, so
sure.
They're pretty well known tracks in New South Wales.
Okay, how do the tracks there compare to the ones here?
The prep is totally different. I think obviously less people going racing and less resources. They don't prep them as good. The jumps are a lot smaller. Maybe, I'm not saying safer, but definitely a little smaller. Some of the tracks over here are just a lot bigger, but obviously the competitive, being more people and more competitors, the level and the skill of the riders over here is a lot higher. And especially there's a lot, it's been going on for a long time, but even nowadays, you have so many facilities and kids starting out at 4 and 5 years old racing. And even at that age, some kids are homeschooled. They don't even go to school. They're just, their family's 150% in on riding and racing motorcycles. So if you've got that much time to ride, you're pretty much, going to be good. Not always, but you've got a very good chance. So that's kind of unheard of in Australia. Everyone goes to school and, you just ride and race after school or on the weekend.
So when you came to the States, you said this was in 2011. Were you sponsored at the time? Were you a professional? Were you an amateur? What was the story of, hey, I'm going to go do this. Here's what we're going to do. How much support did you have to make that decision?
Yeah. So kind of taking a step back, in 2009, we were at the Australian motocross, the junior motocross titles at Mafra, and Colleen Millsaps from MTF actually brought, I want to say I think Jordan Smith came the next year. I think it might have been Carl Peters and Joey Savacci to Australia that year, and they obviously just killed everybody there. And that kind of opened a lot of people's eyes, like, oh, what's MTF? And that's our Millsaps training facility down in Cairo, Georgia. And my dad got talking to Colleen and like, Mackenzie's my daughter. She, wants to eventually come over to the US. And Colleen's like, yeah, you should come, bring her to our facility in Cairo and just, my dad seen how good these riders were and he was like, you know what, it's worth a chance. Maybe go over, meet some people, open up some doors for future opportunities. So that was in like October of 2009, and maybe the start of December, my dad and I went over for 3 weeks to MTF. We bought a bike and we rented a camper and we stayed there for 3 weeks. And my dad was just like, wow, this is amazing. I think you should come back again in January. So I went home for Christmas, and my mom actually came back with me for 3 weeks in January. And I also did a couple of local winter AMs down in Florida. And yeah, that kind of opened up some doors. We met a lot of people. I kind of, got my feet wet with doing some, more local races, but I was still racing some pretty good fast girls at the time. But at the time in Australia, I also had a very good Yamaha deal to kind of finish out my junior racing career, which ended at the end of 2011. So I went home back to Australia, finished out all of 2010 and 2011. And then obviously we still stayed in contact with Colleen Millsaps and MTF. And Colleen's like the end of 2000 or end of each year is Mini O's, which is a big amateur race down in Gainesville, Florida.
Yeah.
So the end of 2011, we came back and we went to Mini O's. I didn't have any support. I just had that bike that we bought in the end of 2009. So it was a Yamaha 250F at the time. And I went to Mini O's and I actually won Supercross. And I think I crashed in the first outdoor motocross race. So I think I went like 9-2 for second overall or something. But a lot of people were like, who is this person? Like I remember after practice on the Supercross day, like no one even looked at me when we lined up for practice. But after practice, like everyone was trying to talk to my dad, like, where are you guys from and all this. So it was pretty funny, obviously, me and my dad didn't know anybody other than the people that we had met at MTF. But I had no support at all, and took a while to really get support, even with good results. It was just tough coming in, especially, the women now still don't get that much support as much as they should, let alone back then. And even at amateur level, just obviously you get less support than you do at a professional level.
Yeah, I've been watching that for years, and that is very true. Very true. So you came over here basically unknown on your own dime. Yep,
absolutely. And super thankful that my parents worked very hard and were able to, fund that, just to help kind of pave the way for me to come over here. Not every kid gets that opportunity, but I'm really thankful that my parents were able to do that for me.
That's great. So 2011, was it full season? You were here for the full year?
No, just I had to finish out the year in Australia with the Yamaha team. And obviously I was pretty young. I think I just maybe turned 16 in 2011, or maybe I was even still 15. So it was just, probably smarter for me to, grow up and mature a little bit before I came over to the States. So yeah, I just did mini O's in 2011, and then 2012 I raced Loretta's. So kind of actually backtrack a little bit. We came to mini O's in 2011. Everything went good at the race. On the way home, my dad's like, if you want to come back next year and race Loretta's, I think I'm going to leave you here for 3 weeks by yourself. I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, well, if you want to race Loretta's, I'm going to have to, I'm not going to be able to be here all the time with you. So he's like, I changed the flight. I'm going to fly home and you'll be here for 3 weeks by yourself. I'm like, okay. So he kind of gave me a quick rundown on, how to look after my bike and everything that I needed, and, went home and I was kind of left to figure it out myself. And it went good for like a week, and then I actually forgot to put oil in my bike.
Oh no.
So I went off a jump on a sight lap, and my bike seized up and broke my shoulder, split my knee open, and basically stayed over here for another week and a half or so before I could fly home. Pretty banged up. So that wasn't fun, but I've been a believer in learning the hard way. So I never jump any jumps on the first lap anymore, and I'll always double check that I have oil in my bike.
That's a good lesson.
Yeah. But yeah, then, I came over in 2012. You have to do the area and the regionals. So I came over, did an area. I was here for like 3 or 4 weeks, went home, and then I came back for 2 months, the middle of the year, right before Loretta's. I did a regional, and then I stayed, and trained at MTF and went to Loretta's.
That's what I was going to ask. Did you stay right at Millsaps? We've been there. My son trained there for a while before you. So the place was fairly new at the time. It wasn't near what I'm sure it was by the time you got there or is today. But they had a house or a place for the riders to stay, didn't they? You live right on scene.
Yeah, so I, obviously being a female, Colleen wasn't about, obviously, and either was my parents, me staying in a house full of boys, especially being a teenager. So I actually had my own little cabin in 2012, and then I went back to MTF in 2013, and I bought like a small little toy hauler camper, and I lived in that in 2013.
Okay. So to give anybody an idea of what the MTF is it's a pristine campground with an epic motocross track there.
Yes, absolutely. Honestly, I have some friends that have training facilities, and I've been to some other training facilities here in South Carolina, and MTF is definitely the top training facility in the country. I know there's a lot of good places nowadays, but just their structure and their facility is unbelievable, and Colleen herself as a trainer is amazing. Like I obviously haven't been there for over 10 years now, but it definitely helped me a lot with, technique and things like that. I obviously had a lot of training growing up in Australia, but just a lot of things that I didn't know. And yeah, it was a huge, I'm glad I was able to go to MTF for the time that I was able to go there.
Yeah, for sure. Do you still keep in touch with her? Have you talked to her or communicated with her at all?
No, not really. I haven't talked to her in quite a while. Obviously, also being out of the motocross scene, I'm not going to even any amateur motocross races or anything like that. So I haven't really crossed paths with her for a long time.
Okay, I'm just curious.
Yeah.
So you did the Loretta's thing.
Yep.
2012. That worked out.
Yeah. So 2012, I actually I went to Loretta's. Like I knew it was obviously one of the biggest races in the world, and obviously still being new, I'm like, I'll just go with let's go try and get a top 5. I got a third in the first moto, and the second moto I won, and I was like, okay, oh my God, now I'm like in the driver's seat pretty much. If I win the next moto, I'll win the championship. So all of a sudden my goal went from getting the top 5 to, all right, we got to win. And my last moto, I think I was second off the start, and I passed to the lead, and I ended up going down in the 10 Commandments on like lap 3. And the girl I needed to beat, I got up, and the girl I needed to beat was right ahead of me. And we were in like 8th or 9th, and we moved through the pack, and I just pumped up so bad, and I could see her the entire race, but I just couldn't do anything about it. So I ended up losing that year by 1 point, which kind of, obviously, I'm very competitive. I was pretty disappointed, but at the end of the day, I was also stoked that I met my goal of getting a top 5. But if I had have known how far back she was, I would have probably just like chilled a little bit, maybe not have crashed, but I shoulda, woulda, coulda. But I made sure that didn't happen again by going and winning the next 3 years.
That's right. Sticking it to her.
Yep.
That's awesome. You then raced the professional WMX, right?
Yeah, so I did Loretta's in 13, and then I was able to do it in 12, and they changed the rule that I could race it again in 13, 14, and 15. But I was able to race WMX in 2013. It was the last year that it was actually on Pro Day, and they, condensed the series from 8 rounds down to 3 rounds. But I had a little bit of support through Rock River Yamaha at the time, and yeah, we raced on Pro Day. We had a moto in between the 250 and 450 Pro motos, and then our last moto was at the end of the day at like 6 o'clock, when the track was the gnarliest. But we still had, manufacturer support, and it was great. So I did that in 2013. My first race at Hangtown didn't go great. I was just more like caught off guard by how many people were there, and I was pretty nervous. And then we went to the second race at High Point, and I rode really good. I actually was battling with Jessica Patterson, and I had a lap to go. I was leading, and I caught my knee in a rut and absolutely destroyed my knee. So I rolled the whole last lap, and I ended up third. So it was still my first ever podium at a WMX. I couldn't line up for the next race. And I think we had 3 weeks or so to Southwick, and I kind of rode a little bit and went to Southwick and went 2-2 and got my first podium. So I definitely achieved a lot in 2013. I ended up flying home. I actually flew after Loretta's, flew to X Games, raced 2 laps of X Games because my knee was so jacked, and didn't finish X Games. But we raced X Games Saturday. I think we flew home to Australia Sunday night, and I got my knee fixed that week and kind of rehabbed, and then came back in 2014 for another year at WMX, and everything was going really good. I won 7 out of the first 8 motos, and we had a little break in the middle of the year. I needed to go home and get a visa sorted, like some immigration stuff, and went home to Australia and was just doing a local race and spun out on my friend's bike and broke my elbow. And yeah, kind of all went downhill after that. I never was really able to regain my motocross mojo. I won Loretta's the next year in 2015, but as far as WMX, I kind of just was all a little bit downhill after that. And also from 2014 through 2016, when I did race WMX, it was not on Pro Day, so we didn't have any support. I got bikes and some parts and things like that, but I was paying out of pocket to go racing and just making, the contingency that anybody can make. So I wasn't making no living at the time, that's for sure.
Sure. What got you into racing off-road then? And for the listeners that don't know the difference, motocross, supercross is one thing. Off-road is considered pretty much everything else.
Yeah. So since WMX kind of fell apart, in 2014, I think, I moved up to South Carolina from MTF, where I was staying in 2012 and 13, and was living with Jessica Patterson and Eddie Ray at the time. And Jess retired from motocross in 2013 and switched to off-road, just kind of looking for something else. She knew that WMX was falling apart, and she was able to land a ride for 2 years on a Yamaha team that's local to Travelers Rest. And obviously spending a lot of time with them, I've seen, the off-road opportunity and how strong, KTM and, those brands support off-road racing like the GNCC and enduros and stuff on the East Coast. So in 2016, I kind of did a couple of races. I did 3 GNCCs, I think, and I won 2 of them. So at that point, I was still racing WMX, but obviously not making very much money. So I kind of reached out to Auntie from KTM, and he had seen that I had, won a couple of GNCCs, and he gave me a support deal, and then the rest is history. I didn't race WMX full time after that. So 2017 was my first full year racing off road, and I think I did do 2 or 3 WMXs that year. Just I still had a little bit of motocross rider in me, so I wanted to still race some. But then 2018 onwards, I was like full time off road. I raced the 3 series that are on the East Coast, and didn't really have time for anything else but off road. And yeah, just kind of been doing it since.
So 2018 was your first year full time off road.
2017, but I did race a couple of WMXs as well.
Okay, so you were full time off road, but you were overtiming on the motocross track.
Yeah, I was doing a little bit of everything.
So, as I say, because that's pretty cool, because 2018, you were part of the winning 2018 Women's ISDE champ, or the women's team for the ISDE in Chile.
Yeah. I went to Chile, in November, and that was something else. But yeah.
I was going to say, explain the ISDE.
It's hell.
It stands for International 6 Days Enduro, right?
6 days of racing. You get there a week before. You walk sun up to sundown every day before the race because you can't look at the test on anything other than foot. So it's a lot of walking. And then, you start on, Monday. And you race 5 days of enduro or, like different special tests and enduro, like all through. You might ride some on the road. You might ride no road. Just depends. It's different every country. But then day 6 is just a motocross race. So day 1 and 2, you normally ride the same loop, 2 times a day. So 4 times over those 2 days. And then day 3 and 4 are new days. You normally do about 3 or 4 different special tests each day, but you've got to, stay on time and make it to those tests. So you do a test, maybe ride 30, 40 minutes to another test, kind of et cetera. So it's a lot of riding. You also have 15-minute work period in the morning and the evening. After you get done, you got to work on your bike. You can't have any help from anybody other than fluids. They can change your oil, check your coolant, fuel your bike, things like that. So it's a lot. It was a great experience to do it. But yeah, I did Chile in 2018. I actually had a pretty good crash on day 5 that kind of, I think it was maybe even day 4. It kind of ruined me for the following year. I went to Portugal in 2019, and after day 2, I ended up calling it quits. And I know it made a lot of people mad, not finishing, but I was just honestly had like PTSD from it. I had such a big crash in Chile, and I felt like I was laying out there in the middle of the woods, in the middle of nowhere for minutes before anybody came. And just kind of, in 2019 when I went to Portugal, and I was kind of living through that again out in a foreign country. They're long days, you're tired. It's mentally challenging. I was just like, I just don't want to, it's just not worth it to me. So that was kind of why I say like ISD is hell. But actually ISD is happening right now. There's a lot of people that love going and love representing their country, and I appreciate that I was able to do that for Australia and be on the winning team that one year. So they're actually in Argentina right now, and my husband Dylan is actually down there with Team USA. He's a mechanic, and I think Team USA is actually doing really good. I think they're winning the women's and winning the trophy team. Team Australia, the women, they were winning yesterday, but I think they got a 2-minute penalty today, which didn't help them for their overall. But it's only day 2 of 6, so anything can happen, and every rider counts. So if anybody gets hurt or they have a bike issue, kind of game over. So it's a lot, but yeah, that's kind of my little story on ISDE.
That's cool. I've never talked to anybody that's done it. I've only seen pictures of it. I had no idea what it really was.
I mean, I would love to do it again if it was in Australia or America, but it's cool to race in a foreign country and stuff. But then I'm an overthinker. I think about worst case scenario. What happens if I get hurt in this country, or, things like that. I probably think way too much than what I should. But yeah, it's cool. It was definitely cool to go to, Chile and Portugal and see places like that I probably would have never gone, had it not been for racing.
Yeah, for sure. So that was 2018. At what point did you begin dominating all things women off-road?
Well, I never actually dominated GNCC. I was able to win some races, but obviously GNCC being kind of the pinnacle of off-road racing, especially on the East Coast, that's kind of like the top series. I was competitive, but never really was able to make it happen. I really struggle with the quad ruts and things like that because the quads race on Saturday, bikes race on Sunday. But as far as enduro, 2018, I did the full National Enduro Series, and it is a little bit tighter and it's single track. Won a couple of races that year, but my fellow Aussie, Taylor Jones, she beat me in 2018. In 2019, I don't know, I guess I figured out enduros and I was able to beat her 9 out of 10 races, and I kind of just went from there. I mean, I've won every year since. My most challenging year for winning enduros was last year. I went head to head with Rachel Archer down to the last race. We ended up tying for the championship, and on all tiebreakers we tied. So, if you tie for a championship, they go back to who has the most number of first, who has the most number of seconds, who has the most number of thirds. Well, every tiebreaker that was possible, we tied in every way. So they didn't have a rule in the rule book. So they were like, well, I guess the best way that we could do it without making up a new rule is whoever wins the last race wins. So I was able to win the last race and then win the championship. So that was a little stressful, but And as far as sprint enduros, obviously having a motocross background and more of a shorter sprint style speed, I was able to take to those pretty good. Being competitive in the sprints as well for the last 5-6 years that I've raced them.
So explain a sprint, and then I want to go back to that tiebreaker story because I have some questions there. So, what is a sprint enduro?
The sprint is off road. Normally, how the most of the sprint enduros work is over 2 days. You race 6 tests on one day, 6 tests on the other day, and it's a cross test, which is more of a motocross track or a grass track, and then an enduro track with enduro test, I should say, which is in the woods. Just race the clock. Go as fast as you can from point A to point B, and then whoever has the quickest time, with the combination of all 12 tests at the end of the weekend, wins the day. But another sprint series that I've been racing this year and last year, they actually just combined it down to one day of racing, and you would do 10 tests, same exact thing, cross test and enduro test, and whoever was had the fastest time after those 10 tests was a winner.
That's crazy. So now I want to go back to the ties. These were full-blown enduros, right?
Yep.
From what I remember of enduros, because I've only rode a couple because it wasn't my thing, you had to average a certain speed, right? I think it was like 24 miles an hour.
Yeah, so that's how it used to be.
Okay, so it's not that way anymore? Or maybe at the pro level it's different?
No, so it did used to be like that, but since I've raced enduros, it's just been, you get your different tests, mileage and whatnot, and you have a key time, which is 9 a.m. or, I would always make mine. So most of the time the women's pro start at 9:18, so I would always change my route sheet so that my key time was, 9:18. But yeah, you take off, you have your, say, a 10-mile test, you just go as fast as you can from point A to point B, you take a break, you get support if it's available, and then you've got to just make sure that you make it to your start of your next test by the time that your route sheet says you need to be there, basically. So, you've got to stay on time throughout the day, but at the end of the day, it's whoever's fastest. So you go as fast as you can just from the start of the test to the end. But you obviously have to take off at your minute, and then, just get to the end as fast as you can, and whoever has the fastest time for the weekend is the winner. Okay,
so you take off, but you're not taking off by yourself, right? It's just maybe you and 1 or 2 or 3 other people? Or are you by yourself?
5 or 6 on the line with you. But in the professional classes, so, Pro 1, Pro 2, and Women's Pro, there's no other person on your row in your class. They're normally a minute behind you or a minute ahead of you.
Okay.
But the amateur races, the way that the sign-up and all that works, there might be a couple of people in your class on that row, and it's more of a, you kind of look at who's in the class or who's on your row in what class, and you kind of, when you first get to the start of the first test, you say, hey, like, how do you ride or whatever, and you just kind of go by that. If you're holding somebody up, you let them by. If they're holding you up, hopefully they let you by.
Yeah, okay, so I remember that. So literally, you and this girl you're tied with, you never see each other in the woods. So you're both going as fast as you can go, and you are both exactly as fast week after week after week is what you're saying, right?
Yep.
That's pretty intense.
Yeah, well, pretty close. The only time I've seen Rachel last year is at Indiana Enduro. I think in the second test, she was a minute ahead of me and I was able to catch her. But that's not normally normal. I mean, maybe she went down or whatnot. I'm also pretty good at that race. So yeah, that was pretty awesome. If you're catching somebody from a minute behind, you're at least a minute faster or close to a minute. So
right.
But most of the time you don't ever see them. It's just like, hopefully, once the times load, or I would always, if I'm ahead of the girls that I'm, waiting for, I will wait at the end of the test and kind of watch my watch and kind of see how far they are behind me in case, the live timing doesn't sometimes update for, a while, depending on where the test is, with phone service and things like that. So I would always wait and check and kind of get a rough estimate like, oh, okay, they beat me, or I have a little bit of time on them. Because it's always good to know.
Oh, for sure. If you can relax a little bit, sometimes you even ride a little faster, but you don't have to push so hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's crazy. I didn't know that about being tied, going all the way down to the very last week. That's impressive.
Yeah.
Because you think back, that's literally one blown corner from a championship.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Or lappers. Lappers are a big game changer in every every off-road race, even motocross, obviously just have a little bit more room for movement on a motocross track. But yeah, lappers are a big challenge in all of off-road, and they can help you or hurt you. So learning to negotiate around or ride around lappers is also a skill in itself.
Yeah, for sure. But on a motocross track, you know who your competition is. Like they started at the same time you did. So what you girls are doing is like ridiculous.
Yep, exactly. I mean, honestly, just go as fast as you can. That's all it came down to. Go as fast as you can without crashing, and just kind of see where you end up. Sometimes my going as fast as I can without crashing is not good enough. Sometimes I do really good. It really depends. Like actually, this year, I think it was round 6. It was in Pennsylvania. It was really rocky. I went as fast as I could every single test, and I lost every single test. I got caught. Like I was saying, I caught Rachel. I actually got caught by another Rachel who's really good in the technical stuff. I got caught by her from a minute behind. She was a minute behind 3 out of the 5 tests, which has never happened to me before. I never got caught in an enduro. I was having a bad day, and it was super technical, but I was going as fast as I could, and it was making me obviously pretty mad. I'm like, I can't do any better, and obviously she's very good in that stuff. So, and hats off to her. But yeah,
no, that's cool.
Yeah.
Let's see. You explained the difference between enduros and sprints. Let's see. Think?
Yeah. So, I mean, enduros are just more mileage, normally like 50, 60, 70 miles at enduro. You never race the same trail. So it's all blind trail. You can't look at it, follow those bright orange arrows. The sprint track is normally a 3-mile cross test, a 3-mile enduro test, and you can bicycle, walk, whatever you got to do to check the track out as many times as you like, and then you race it 6 times on the weekend, or depending on what series you're racing, maybe 10 times over the weekend. So the sprints, they get a little bit more beat up, just obviously because it's a shorter track and more people riding those tracks over and over again, whereas the enduro, everybody just rides it one time, but it is longer days and more mileage, but it is also racing blind trails. So going as fast as you can, as well as reading the arrows, reading the terrain, and, staying safe. Obviously there'll be drop-offs here and there and things to watch out for that you haven't seen before you're racing it. So that's kind of the difference. Yeah.
And it's funny you say 60, 70 miles, and I would like to invite any of the listeners to just go on YouTube and search Mackenzie Tricker and watch these trails that they're riding. And you girls are flying. And This is stuff that you haven't seen before. And that's what people need to look at when they watch these videos. I'm not a terrible dirt bike rider, but I watch what you guys are doing and I'm like, how do you process information that fast? It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's so cool to watch. So
it definitely takes time. I was actually just talking to some friends the other day. I raced a full gas in 2016 and I crashed every single enduro test, like just on routes and things like that. So back then, like a goal for me was to make it through an enduro test, which was 3 miles. The enduro test at the sprints are 2, 3, 4 miles. A goal for me was like to make it through a test without crashing. Obviously still going as fast as I can. But when I started, making it through some sprints without crashing, I'm like, heck yeah, I'm doing good. And even when I was doing GNCC, I mean, even nowadays, with lappers and racing over 2 hours, if you can make it through a GNCC without a tip over, you're doing good. So for the longest time, I obviously couldn't do that. But I did end up making a few GNCCs there for a while without crashing, which was an accomplishment.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of things that will catch you off guard when you're riding in the woods.
For sure. So are you done for the season?
Yep. I just finished the last sprint race this past weekend, so I'm done.
So done for the year, and from what I understand, retiring from professional racing.
Yes, that's correct. Yep, so I'm done, and just decided it's time to hang the boots up.
And what's next? So I know what your full-time job is. Do you have anything planned coming up, or is it full-time job now?
No, I don't really have anything planned. So I have a full-time job working at the BMW US Rider Academy in Greer, South Carolina, which is about 30 minutes from where I'm based in Travelers Rest. I have actually been there working since the middle of 2021, but obviously juggling kind of racing and sponsorships and things like that, and some kind of brand clashes, I would say, in some ways. Not too many people know that I've actually worked there. So, that's kind of my... I've obviously been doing it for a long time now, a couple of years. But, I'm full-time there, and I enjoy being able to kind of share my knowledge and riding history with a lot of different people of all different levels and from all different places and countries. And just honestly also learn about the different bikes. I had never rode an adventure bike until I went to BMW. So it was a lot for me to learn, obviously riding a small dirt bike for a long time and having some background. It wasn't a huge challenge, but it was still, obviously you're now riding a bike that's 550 pounds, let alone something that's, 200, 220 pounds. So it's been fun. I really enjoy the people that I work with, and, I get to even work with people like you. So yes, it's a great job to have. And, I always said, I wouldn't quit, racing until I had something kind of to step away to. And when I went to BMW and had a job interview with Aaron back in 2021, that's kind of what he's like, why do you want to work here? And I said, I'm kind of looking after motocross, or after racing. And I obviously want to stay involved in the industry. I don't want to just go and get a 9-to-5 office job or something like that. So that's where I'm at.
So that must have been early 21, because it seems like maybe it was 22 now that I think about it. We got to ride together in the Black Hills.
I had an interview in May of 2021, and I think I started working in July. And then the trophy where I met you the first year was September. So I was still really new working there in 21 when I met you.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah.
And then in 22, Adventure Fest in the Black Hills, we got to actually go riding together.
Yep. Sturgis, we got to go riding. So that's one of the cool things about working there is obviously we get to go to the rallies and cool events like that. And I'd never been to that part of the country before then, so that was really cool.
Well, hopefully we all get to do that next year.
Yeah, I hope so. And mate, we won't talk about what happened on that ride. Just make sure that if you put your key fob in a box full of water, you put it in a Ziploc bag. You learn the hard way, right?
Yep, learn the hard way. And I just remember getting gas, and you turned around and said, "Hey, no tagging me in any pictures."
Yep. Yep. Yeah. So, obviously, when I did, go and talk to Aaron and, try and get the job at BMW, I went to Auntie at KTM. I was around KTM at the time. I'm like, hey, I have a job opportunity, go work for BMW. Obviously, I make pretty good money racing dirt bikes, but I obviously don't make any money Monday through Friday kind of thing. Everything's on the weekend. He's like, yep, no worries. Just obviously, he's like, I just don't want you to be marketed hugely riding another brand. I'm like, I understand that. He said, you'd be surprised how many people that race for us or work for us are also associated with other brands. You just obviously don't know about it because people don't post on social media, things like that. So pretty much from December 1st, my gas contract is up. So you'll probably see a little bit more of BMW stuff on my Instagram and social media.
So full-time instructor at the BMW school. And I got to spend, I guess I was with you for 3 days because we were there as the prep course for 2 days and then private one-on-one, the two of us for a day. And it was great. It's always great to learn motorcycling from a motorcyclist. Yep. You can learn things from teachers, but it's different when they're not doing the same thing. But then to even up it a little bit further, and I've found this with all of the instructors I've worked with at BMW, but that last day when we were together, to learn skills that, it's like I knew how to do it, but I couldn't figure it out. But you being a dirt biker, same as my background, you were able to explain it in a way that it just clicked. And then there was one thing that we both struggled with, that stupid balance beam. And you're like, man, I don't know. So then you started practicing. We just did it together and you're like, oh, got it. Here's what we're doing. And you said, hey, try this. And I think I got it four times in a row. Yeah.
Yeah. That is a challenge. Obviously, watching someone and picking up on what they're doing, you can pick up from, obviously a lot of the time you can pick up what they're doing, but sometimes you'll see something and obviously more of an advanced exercise like that. It's not something we teach all the time. So that day, everything to me looks really good that you were doing, riding that balance beam, and you're like, I'm just struggling. I'm like, I don't know, let me ride it. And I was kind of struggling with the same thing. And then I was like, finally clicked, like, obviously eyes up and look ahead helps with everything. But I was looking ahead, but it's like pick my eyes up even more. And I started like mastering it over and over and over again. I'm like, hey, do this. And then that's what kind of helped you as well. So that is also a good thing about obviously riding or doing private. We get to ride a little bit more and, practice and, work on more advanced techniques with people like you. Plus through our regular classes, we go through our curriculum, which obviously is great for everybody, even to kind of, if they are a good rider, refresh their skills, or a beginner rider that's, learning to ride a motorcycle. So yeah, I really, really enjoy my job now. It's awesome.
That's good. And it shows, throughout the trophy prep course, our time together, and then throughout the actual qualifier, that's your element. That's your happy place. It shows. So I'm super happy you got that job.
Yeah, thank you.
To talk about the course or the school, this isn't a BMW anything, but I have told so many people you need to go do that. You don't even crash your own bike. But you had said something about teaching, all skill levels. Can you take a total beginner? Do you guys do that there?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. I mean, we even offer like an MSF class, so somebody that never ever rode a motorcycle, we offer a class like that. And then our off-road programs, our 1 and 2 day programs, and then even our on-road 1 and 2 day programs, they're for all different skill levels. Obviously, you need to be able to let your clutch out, things like that, use your brakes to some extent. But, we have people that, especially for off-road, have rode maybe. We actually just had a guy recently that had put 1,000 miles on a motorcycle. He said in the MSF class, he broke his leg. So obviously when he said that, I was like, oh man, like how do you break your leg in MSF class? Maybe it was just a bad luck incident.
Mm-hmm.
But when he said I've only rode 1,000 miles, I'm like, okay. And he said, I've never rode off-road. I'm like, okay, well that honestly sometimes isn't a bad thing if you've never rode off-road because you don't have any bad habits. But then honestly, it could also go the other way. If you've only rode on-road, you have a lot of on-road riding habits, which is sometimes a challenge going off-road. But
Sure.
This guy, honestly, he did really good. We start out obviously a very basic exercises with our flow ride trail stops, and everything kind of builds on itself after that. So yeah, there's no specific riding ability needed. It's, it's a great program and everybody gets something out of it. Even if you're a good rider, you may pick up on something that even if you've done the course before, it's hard over 2 days to pick, and remember everything that you do. So maybe if you've done the class and you are a good rider, you come back for a second or third time, you're like, damn, I don't remember that from the first time. So you're always gonna pick up or learn something, and it's always also really good to, just always refine those skills. It's perishable, and yourself, you probably realize you take even a couple of weeks, a month, or maybe even more, you get a little rusty, and yeah, so it's good to, it's good to ride, and yeah, like I said, the courses are made for really any skill level.
It's always good to get back out in an area with instruction.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm a firm believer of that.
Yeah, plenty of times where you think, oh, I'm doing good, and then even you see maybe a video of yourself, and you're like, what was I doing? It didn't feel like it looked,
Absolutely. I think we've talked about quite a bit of stuff. I think we got a pretty good story out of this. So anything we want to talk about that you can think of that I have not touched on?
Not really. I mean, kind of, that's pretty much it, I think.
That doesn't mean we're done, because my personal favorite part of the show, you said you haven't listened, which is good.
Yeah.
And bad, right? Because, you're not listening. But no, it's good because I have my favorite part of the show, which is 5 questions.
Yep.
And I've actually added a question. You did not get the new one, but I have 20 questions, and then I take a randomizer wheel on the computer, put 1 through 20 in it, spin it, and then you get any, it's totally random 5 questions out of the 20, or now 21.
All right.
So they are usually motorcycle related, not always, but they're designed to get you to think.
Okay.
So prepare to be stumped. Maybe you won't be.
Uh-huh.
So are you nervous?
No, not really.
Okay. Okay. So the 5 questions. Question number 1. What topic would you speak about if you were asked to give a TED Talk on something that is outside of your main area of expertise?
A TED Talk. Probably, like positive thinking or something about mental health.
That's good. I've not had that answer before.
Yeah. I mean, just because I've struggled with it personally.
Okay.
Yeah.
Question number 2. What is the book or books you have given most as a gift?
A book that I've given as a gift. I don't think I've ever given a book as a gift.
And if that's the case, that's the case. What's funny about that is I believe that question has come up on the last 2 podcasts, both with the same answer.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever, and I mean, maybe a cookbook for my mom or something for Christmas one year, but I mean, I don't know.
A cookbook
I
it
don't
was.
think that counts as a book, really.
Okay, this one interests me. When this one came up, I was excited. Question number 3. What is the best advice you have received as a motorcyclist?
Photos on the right. No, I really don't know. Just think positive, I would say. That's a hard question because there's so much advice that over the years has helped me.
Yeah.
That's a real difficult one.
That's why I say, I was curious to see how you were going to answer that one.
Yeah, no, I really don't know.
Someone that has gotten a ton of advice.
Yeah.
So question number 4. When you think of the word successful, who is the first person who comes to mind and why?
Oh, gosh, I don't know. Maybe someone like Chad Reed. Obviously being Australian and, he made a pretty good career out of motocross riding and come from a little small town north of Sydney. And yeah. But then when I think about him, I also leads me to think about Jet Lawrence, who's doing the same thing. Both those boys, Jet and Hunter, both are doing the same thing, kind of following in Chad's footsteps, maybe even going to be better than Chad was. So, and they're both Australian. So, but yeah, probably Chad and Jet Lawrence.
Okay. Question number 5. Final question. What is one thing on your anti-bucket list?
Anti-bucket list?
Yeah, everybody's got a bucket list. What would be on your anti-bucket list?
Like something I don't want to do?
Correct.
Probably skydive again.
You say again?
I skydived when I was 16, but I'm pretty scared about it again now. And just actually last week or the week before, we had 2 skydive instructors in one of our classes, and Ricardo and Aaron, who obviously you know who Ricardo and Aaron is, but our chief and lead instructor at BMW, that's Ricardo and Aaron, they're like, we need to go skydiving, we should all go. And I'm like, I am not going. They're like, well, if I'm going or we're all going, you're going too. And I'm like, no, I can't. I don't know why you'd be kind of surprised, but obviously the amount of flying I do, they're probably just only recently I've kind of conquered my fear a little bit of flying, but I went through terrible 10 years. I would hate flying, and I obviously have to fly to go home and fly to go to a lot of places. So I've never had anything crazy happen. I just developed a massive fear of flying. So yeah, I don't know. I said I'd want to go skydiving again.
Oh, that's good.
Super random, but yeah.
That's okay. Random is usually the best answer.
Yeah.
So that about wraps it up. Do you have any final parting words for the listeners?
If you do ride motorcycles and you're looking to maybe invest in some training, come down to the BMW Performance Center in Greer, South Carolina. You can ride, obviously ride our bike, liability free, passion as much as you want, learn as much as you can, and have some fun.
I can attest to that. To elaborate just a little bit on that, when you go to the BMW Performance Center and you pay to take their course, you take the course on their motorcycle that you choose. So, of course, a BMW, but if you, let's say, tip it over and pop the mirror, or not the mirror, but you pop the blinker out of place and you break off a lever early in the morning, and then a little bit later in the morning, you tip it over the other way and break off the other lever. When you go back to have lunch, Mackenzie will have this guy just magically replace everything by the time you get out of lunch. And there's no no additional cost. It's great. So for sure, if you're looking to get into riding, you want to take any training, I highly recommend them. Can they request you as an instructor?
They can. They can request me.
Perfect. And I can attest to that being a good instructor as well.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
So where can the listeners follow you?
Instagram. I have Facebook, but I kind of keep it to more close friends and things like that, but I post a lot of stuff on Instagram. My Instagram handle is Ken's Tricker, or you can type in my full name, Mackenzie Tricker, and I'm sure it'll bring me up. But yeah, post a lot of videos, photos, and things that I'm up to on my Instagram.
And I will put a link to that down in the show notes. Folks, if you have any guest requests or you would like to join me on an episode of the Wild Ass Podcast, reach out to me. Just shoot me a message, social media. Of course, I am Wild Ass Craig, so find me there. But if you like what you're hearing, hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. You can follow the adventures on Facebook or Instagram by looking for The Real Wild Ass. And of course, again, I am Wild Ass Craig. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you again in a couple weeks. And of course, thank you again, Mackenzie, for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having me.